Tanner, do you believe time is running out on Nolan Siegel? And does he, if we don't see much improvement, do you think he's at risk of not finishing the season with McLaren?
Yes and no. I'll tackle both sides of this. So the reason I would lean towards no is who do you replace him with at this point in the middle of the season? Teo Porcher is not taking that car, so that's one name that's out of the hat. Then I guess you would look at some of the other Chevy drivers. Obviously, David Malukas is not getting in that car. I don't think McLaren's interested in Santino Ferrucci. Um, I just don't really see a whole lot of like options that are either directly off of the IndyCar grid or directly on it that they could really, go in and poach. One name that I guess stands out now that I'm, kind of talking through this is Linus Lundqvist, who was doing a fantastic job last year for Chip Ganassi and somehow came into 2025 without a ride. I think that it's possible maybe if we don't see Nolan improve over the season that he could find his way into a ride with McLaren, but I lean towards no because there are a couple of factors that play outside of the sponsorship. Nolan is very young. Like, he doesn't have a terrible amount of experience in IndyCar. This is really midway through his second season, and even his first season was abbreviated in some ways because he missed out on some events. But yeah, I just don't really foresee them moving on. Not because it's like a bad look or anything like that. It's just more to do with the fact that I don't think that there's like a bevy of names out there that you could grab that could do a better job than him based on the amount of time he spent with that team. We're closing in on the year mark of him taking that ride after his 24 hours of Le Mans win last season. So yeah, I just feel like Siegel is definitely not really performing up to par with his teammates, but I really don't think that should be the expectation set for him because he really just is not of the caliber of them just yet. And he's just so much significantly younger. So I think McLaren would be better off just standing pat with the lineup that they have and trying to improve throughout the rest of the season. But we know how temperamental Zach Brown can be. So it's really anyone's guess what he's going to decide to do over the next month or so.
Yeah, and this goes back to what I was saying during our IndyCar preseason show. I said out of all the drivers who could be on the hot seat, I said it would probably be Nolan Siegel unless he improved, because I always say that the McLaren IndyCar program over here is almost like the Red Bull F1 program in terms, musical chairs with drivers and trying to figure out driver lineups. And Pat O'Ward, Christian Lundgaard, obviously given how they're performing, I think they're obviously safe. And then Nolan Siegel, I figured it was fair to give him time in full season to see what he could do. But so far, he just hasn't been close to his teammates at all. As you mentioned, Joe, Nolan is clearly the third driver there at McLaren. And for the longest time, Pat O'Ward's been the number one driver there. But Christian Lundgaard has definitely been pushing him. So I guess you could say that they might have a McLaren F1-like problem where you have Piastri and Norris, trying to be the number one driver, and then you have O'Ward and Lundgaard over here trying to be the number one driver at Aaron McLaren in the NTT IndyCar Series. But I think that Nolan Siegel, he needs the next handful of races to go well for him. He needs to show growth on the racetrack, and if he doesn't, who knows what could happen with that number 6 seat. But I have to agree with Tanner at this point. Who could they possibly, put in the number 6 Chevrolet for the rest of the season? There's really there's really no good options out there. But you did mention Linus Lundqvist. I think he would be a good choice, just to give him a trial run, see what he can do. I think it's a shame that Linus is out of the series because he's an extremely talented driver, and I believe in the right situation, in a stable environment, Linus would eventually become, one of the better IndyCar drivers in the series. I don't know if he'd be one of the best, but I think the best thing they can do this season probably stand pat. But given how impatient Zach Brown is, I would not be surprised later in the season we get an alert that the team has released Nolan Siegel from his contract and we're bringing in another driver. And I want to throw out another name out there. They had an off-season test, I believe, at the Thermal Club around Thanksgiving. It was a test that Logan Sargent was at. They say, but one of the drivers who participated in that test, that didn't get a lot of attention, another driver with F2 experience, like they brought Teo Porcher in from F2, Enzo Fittipaldi. Enzo Fittipaldi is not, he doesn't have an open wheel racing program for this year, since it looked like his road to F1 dream is over. His brother Pietro Fittipaldi's driven an IndyCar before. If they wanted to bring in another talent, from F2 and test it with the team, and why not give someone like an Enzo Fittipaldi a chance? But, at the same time, when you look at Nolan Siegel last year, they brought him in, because they really needed some funding. I guess if they, still need the funding at this point, they might be willing to overlook that, ignore some of the performances. But, at some point, even when you do bring in funding, teams will eventually move on from you. And we'll see if Nolan Siegel will be given the rest of the season to figure it out. But I definitely think his seat is certainly getting warmer.